Hello guys. Hi. Hello. I'm Rohit here, and I'm going to talk today about what is wrong with climate science. Uh, Climate change and climate science is a very well-known thing today, and it's a pretty much talked about subject, and a lot of people are highly concerned about the future of Earth and the climate science. So, so a lot of people give a lot of suggestions about climate change depending on climate science, but I have realized that there are some issues or there are some problems with climate science, so I'm going to talk to you about that in this particular video. So disclaimer, I just want to make it clear that this is not a video. I'm not a climate change denier, so I understand what is climate change. So if you are expecting that I'm going to talk about uh, how the sun is the cause of the climate change, or how CO2 is not the greenhouse gas, all that bullshit, I'm not. So I'm not exactly a CO2. I'm not a climate change denier. Okay. In fact, I am more of a climate change. Um, I pretty much understand how climate change is happening, and CO2 is the culprit, and CO2 is the greenhouse gas because of which climate change is going to happen. I also sort of know how bad the climate change can be, how 1.5 degree climate uh, uh, global warming, or 2 degree global warming, or 3 degree global warming can be disastrous for the life on Earth. So I am not a climate change denier. But that said, that doesn't mean that climate change is everything good and nothing bad. So there are quite a few problems about climate change. So most of them, whatever I'm going to talk about today in this video, is basically given in this book of mine, the Decoding Human Psyche. This is actually a book in which I go into detail about human psyche, human psychology, why uh, why a person takes, what are the beliefs, how the beliefs form, what is the psyche of an individual, what is subconscious mind, and all that. A lot of things are given in this, and this is basically climate change, or causality of climate change from the perspective of human psychology. So this is a very important, very interesting book actually. So if you want to go into detail about whatever I'm going to say about in this video, you can buy this book. This is available online on Amazon, as well as on this Notion Fish website. Anyhow, so the answer to the question, what is wrong with climate science, is a lot is wrong with climate science, a lot. And I mean it, it's a lot. Now I'm not going to talk about the leftist bias. So everyone has an awareness that the entire climate change campaign is basically leftist campaign, and it is basically having extreme leftist bias. And most of the climate activists will, turn out into political Democrat and all that. And communists, and so that leftist bias is there, and I'm not going to talk about that. We know that until politics goes out of climate campaign, it cannot go forward. But anyhow, so that is one of the problems about climate change, but that's not the problem about climate science. So it's basically a problem of the climate campaign or climate movement. So I'm not going to talk about that. That is there definitely, but that I'm not going to talk about. So what are the problems? So human psyche, there are a lot of things, a lot of cognitive biases mentioned in my book, which out of which confirmation bias and congruence bias, these are two cognitive biases. They are cognitive biases, which are extremely relevant in case of climate science. Why I'm saying like that is because the The entire climate science is based on so in confirmation bias, what happens is that you have a belief, and you keep confirming that belief wherever you see, whatever you gain pleasure by reading the things which confirm your belief. And the congruence bias is basically you ask questions only to prove your belief right, and you don't ask questions to prove your belief wrong. Now the belief which I'm talking about in climate science is basically that CO2 emissions are the cause of the rise in the CO2, and that CO2 is causing the trapping of the energy, and that is causing the globe to warm. So this is the basic belief. Okay, so I don't want to be too harsh about climate science, but they do have this grave problem of confirmation bias and congruence bias both. So what exactly is congruence bias, and how is it related to climate science? So congruence bias, they have this belief that CO2 and other greenhouse gases are the ones responsible. So the activities which are responsible, which release more greenhouse gases, are responsible. So that's what is the belief. And activities which are not releasing greenhouse gases are not responsible. So that is an corollary. Okay. So this is the idea. This is the belief basically, and they produce. So if you see the entire climate literature, majority of the climate literature is basically the same thing. They want to just measure how many CO2 emissions are there and all. So they have basically ruled out role of sun, and they've ruled out a lot of other things, other causes. They've ruled out if it is a natural variation, and also. So I don't want to be too harsh about them, but there seems to be a congruence bias. So they are just made up their mind that greenhouse gas emissions is the only cause. So there can be no other cause. But the only way to prove that this congruence bias does exist is to show that there is something else which is basically causing climate change. So there is something which is causing the raised CO2 level, which is completely independent of releasing of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Maybe also in much more detail in subsequent videos. But basically, the climate change, climate science basically has a lot of congruence bias. So they have only one direction of thinking, that yes, CO2 emissions are the cause. There is no other cause. There is no other activity of humans other than releasing CO2 emissions or GHG emissions, which is the cause of the climate change. So this is what, and they're basically, you see, the confirmation bias and congruence bias. Both of these are also typical leftist cognitive biases as well. So they have you need a lot of critical thinking to understand that I have confirmation bias or I don't have confirmation bias. So the leftist ideology people, they have a relative lack of critical thinking. So they just cannot critically analyze their thoughts. So they are more prone to confirmation bias and congruence bias. So this is one thing. Okay. So there are some belief biases, and there is some illusion of reality. So the same illusion of, there are some typical beliefs of climate change people, which are so hard bound in their head that they just cannot give them up. Some of them I'm going to talk about in the later part of the video. So there is a lot of decay effect. So what is the decay effect? So overestimation of one's knowledge, or overestimation of one's. So this decay effect is it's a cognitive bias actually. So most of the climate scientists think that basically the CO2 emissions data is enough, and other parts of the sciences have no relevance. Basically, all the biology people and the environment guys and the people who are basically for the environment, it's actually the whole environment movement has been sidelined, and the only thing which remains is CO2 emissions. So that's the problem. And this self-serving bias. So this is another typical um, cognitive bias, which is basically very high. So if you go to a climate scientist and you say anything which is against their wishes, they will get angry like anything. They will just pound on you. They will not want to talk to you. They will not want to discuss any other perspective. So that's what is a typical example of a person with a high self-serving bias. So they think that they just cannot be wrong. So that's the wrong way of doing science. Okay, so what are the what are the beliefs basically? So they are basically GH, what I call it is GHG emissions bias. What does that mean is that they are basically completely focused only on greenhouse gas emissions. So release of CO2 or release of other emissions, other greenhouse gases is the only activity which is harmful, which is which could be partially true. I'm not saying that it is wrong, but there are some activities which are not causing any GHG emissions, but still they could be problematic. But no, they are for them only emissions is important. Other things irrelevant. So this stubborn attitude, this stubborn focus only on GHG emissions is the one which is extremely big problem in climate science, and it is there almost definitely. So I'm not having any doubt about it. Okay, so they are basically heavily dependent, too much over dependence on CO2 emission statistics. So they want to focus only on CO2 emission statistics. They have a lot of beliefs about this, like GHG emissions or the act of emitting greenhouse gases are the sole cause of climate change. So there can be no other cause of climate change. This is wrong according to me, and I can prove that also. But this is a very wrong way of thinking. Anyhow, so they have a feeling basically because probably leftist ideology that capitalists and rich nations are the sole villains of the story, and the poor, including the poorer nations, are the victims of climate change. So the poorer countries, although they have extreme amount of population, and for them in them extreme amount of sprawled cities and agriculture, a lot of agriculture is there, a lot of meat consumption is there, a lot of animal agriculture will be there, a lot of water usage, water wastage, very poor way of living and all that, but still they will be the victims, and the capitalists or um, the elites or the tycoons are the only basically the causes of those who are having a very high GHG emissions data. They are the ones who are responsible for climate change. So out of the 8 billion, 7.5 billion people, only a few 100 million people maybe probably are responsible for the climate change. This is the attitude of theirs, which is extremely small, extremely narrow-minded, and it's wrong actually. So only activities that release CO2 are harmful. So that's what they believe, and what they believe is that those activities which absorb CO2 are good, whatever it is the activity, whatever the activity, the activity is not important. If it absorbs CO2, it's good. And those which don't release CO2 aren't harmful, even if they destroy nature. So if there's an activity which absolutely destroys the nature for permanently over there, but even then, even a small amount of CO2 is released. It's not much CO2 released, so it is not a very bad activity. So that's how they look at it. So they are basically focusing only on the CO2. whether it destroys nature, whether it is harmful for nature, whether it is pro nature, that they don't mind. They're least bothered about. So we'll come to that how they are. So they have such belief that nature is a bad solution, and spending money on nature is waste. Spending money on nature and ecosystems is a waste. They think that protecting ecosystems or promoting ecosystems isn't good enough. They are not saying that it's bad, but they are saying that that's not the priority. The priority is what? Mm, Basically, they think that the climate change is an energy problem. So they want to convert all the bad energy sources into good energy sources. So they want to say that, okay, protecting ecosystems and promoting ecosystems by planting trees is a excuse which billionaires have to buy a carbon credit. So they don't want to give any chance to these billionaires to keep making money from their oil reserves by planting trees. If they plant trees, and then that is basically going to give them carbon credits, which means that they can drill more oil. So they want to stop them from drilling oil and make money. So it's basically the hatred of capitalism, which is poured inside the climate science. Basically, that is probably the reason. So these are very stubborn beliefs which they have. So they also don't have any this thing: biodiversity crisis, extinction crisis, and insect apocalypse. So these are absolutely relevant and very, very important problems, and they are very, very they are independent probably, and they are probably less important and less urgent for the climate change science community. So they will not focus on biodiversity statistics or extinction crisis statistics or insect apocalypse statistics. So these statistics are basically ecosystem destruction statistics. So if a particular activity is there, which is basically destroying nature, these statistics are absolutely bad for that particular activity. But that particular activity doesn't release carbon, and it tries to absorb slight bit of carbon. So which means that this activity is a good activity, even though it destroys nature, no problem. So that is what is their thing. So their focus is only on CO2 emissions or CO2 absorption. Their focus is not on nature, not on biodiversity, not on extinction crisis, nothing. So species preservation and all, no. So they are not bothered. They're basically not bothered about this part. They only want to focus on the CO2 emissions part. Okay, the only solution is to achieve 100% decarbonized economy. So this is the only solution. So if you achieve this, you are going to solve climate crisis. That's what their mindset is. So 100% decarbonized economy is really difficult to achieve. That apart, you have to completely break the backbone of the economy, and that is really impossible to do. They want to achieve that by 2025, 2030, which is really insane basically. But yes, if you want to avoid 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees or 3 degrees global warming, then we may have to do that. But the problem is that they are focused only on this. So they don't want to treat biodiversity crisis, extinction crisis, and insect apocalypse at the same time. So they don't want to. That's not urgent. So that they can completely ignore that. Basically, the only thing which they worry about is 100% decarbonized economy. For that, if they the biodiversity stats go haywire also, they don't care. So they are not focused on that. So if the extinction crisis continues, the insect apocalypse worsens, but they achieve 100% decarbonized economy, they are happy. So that is the wrong way of thinking. So they are focusing only on the 100% decarbonization, but they are completely focusing away from the nature-based solution. So you can understand that I am basically more of a half earther. and I am more of a pro nature rather than pro uh, pro climate science, because climate science, I'm really doubting that, what I feel is really right, and it's not right. There's a lot of there are a lot of issues with climate science. Okay, so they have what is called as tunnel vision. So they want to focus only on one part of the issue. They want to avoid the other part of the issue. So only for fixed to gaze in one particular aspect of the issue. They don't want to look at a particular issue from other different perspectives. uh, the perspective of a nature lover is completely out of question for them. The There are some, actually, I'm not saying, I don't want to generalize it, but most of them would want decarbonization more importantly than nature preservation and ecosystem preservation. And if you give them, yeah, in a particular activity, if there's some negativity, like let's say, um, fossil fuels. So if you are burning fossil fuels or you are burning coal, so that's bad for them. So they are focusing only on the negative part of it. The positive part of it, they're not focusing on. So if a particular person is a CEO and he has a company, he owns a company, and he provides electricity from coal in a poor country. So the positive changes which that electricity is going to bring about, they're not going to talk about. They're not going to focus on that. They're going to focus on the negativity of that particular coal produced electricity. So that is a incomplete picture. You cannot look at one part of the picture and completely ignore the other part of the picture. So um, if the country is poor, and if the country wants to improve its economy, and it wants more of its people to be happy, then they have no other option but to use coal if they have coal reservoirs. So making the entire coal economy into doldrums, or shutting it down, can cost a lot to the economy. And um, environment, yes, so they are not, they're least bothered about that. Okay, so for them, GHG emissions is the only way to look at environment. So there is no other way. So they have reached some solutions which are absolutely, you can say, I'm not going to say that they are absolutely wrong. Some of them are absolutely crap, but some of them okay, but um, they are basically based only on greenhouse gas emissions statistics, and completely ignoring the nature and the how um, it destroys nature, basically. Electric cars. So uh, converting the entire petrol cars into electric cars is a very, very hell of a task to do in a short span of maybe 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, what they want to say. So it's a, and electric cars, most of them generated by running on electricity, which is basically generated by majority by coal or by this. It doesn't make any sense. So electric cars is actually not a direct solution. Okay, indirect solution, if the electricity is generated by green means, then it is a okay solution. But electric cars needs roads. So roads means more concretization. So you need more road network. So you need more, destruction of ecosystems. So these ecosystems, there is a habitat destruction and habitat fragmentation because of these roads. So more roads means more concretization, and concretization is literally at that particular surface area of the earth, the the ecosystems are uh, destroyed for centuries together. So more solar farms, more wooden houses, more wooden stuff. These are crap, completely crap. Because wood, more you are going to build wooden houses, the more you are going to chop trees. That means you are going to destroy nature, which is absolutely ridiculous in terms of biodiversity and extinction crisis. So you are going to add to biodiversity and extinction crisis, but they have no this thing about it. Because why? Because wooden houses means what? You are going to destroy the tree. It's okay. We can put 2 more trees, but 10 more trees. But anyways, that tree, before it died, it sucked a lot of CO2. So that's a good thing. That's what they say. So their focus is only on CO2 emissions or CO2 absorption. So if that is going to completely destroy the ecosystem, they are not bothered. They are least bothered. That is the reason why they are like completely into wooden skyscrapers, which is an absolutely ridiculous um, idea, which is based completely on greenhouse gas emissions bias. So they want to focus only on the greenhouse gas emissions data. More trains and roads and less planes. So this is again another slightly controversial thing which I believe, because aeroplanes travel through the air, so they don't need any nature destruction in between. But trains and roads, they basically need concretization from the start to the end of their journey. So which means that concretization is permanent destruction of ecosystems. So it causes habitat destruction at that particular level for centuries together. In that particular surface area, there won't be any green member, there won't be any carbon, there won't be any ecosystem developing in that area for centuries together. Not 1 year, not 10 years, not 15 years, for centuries together. The concretized area is gone. So nature is completely destroyed in that particular surface area, which is of no avail to the climate science. So that is a really big problem. And that's why comparatively airways are better as far as nature is concerned. Why? Because they need some nature destruction at the airports, but in between, the airways and waterways both use natural ways. They don't need to be created by destroying nature. So that is the reason why aeroplanes are better. But okay, aeroplanes are having a very bad CO2 emissions data, so they are like hating them. Okay, that's also one way of looking at it. But there's something called as virtual emissions, which we are going to talk about later. So if you focus only on virtual emissions, then more trains and more roads is absolutely bad idea. More aeroplanes is a good idea. So if you see both the statistics together, if GHG emissions statistics as well as virtual emission statistics we combine, which we don't have presently, we cannot do that because we don't have standardization for virtual emissions. But if we can do that, then I think that both of them will turn out to be almost the same. So aeroplanes are not as bad as trains. That's going to turn out, because wherever trains and roads are there there is a loss of carbon sink. So carbon is not going inside. So ecosystems are getting lost. So the carbon is not being locked there. So that is, and CO2 scrubbers. So CO2 scrubbers is an absolutely good idea for them. Why? Because it's reducing CO2. But it's an absolutely rubbish idea as far as nature is concerned. So it's not going to feed ecosystems. It is going to be it's going to need a lot of nature, and it's going to destroy nature, and it's going to be an absolute rubbish idea as far as nature is concerned. So they reach the wrong solutions basically. So they will focus, they will divert a lot of funding onto these wrong solutions. These are absolutely wrong solutions as far as nature is concerned. But why they reach those wrong solutions is because of their biases. So they have this greenhouse emissions bias, so greenhouse gas emissions bias. So they want to focus only on greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why they come with, okay, so they couldn't reach the right solutions due to their biases. Why? What sprawled cities? So they don't say that sprawled cities are bad. Sprawled cities are good as long as the houses are wooden. So if you want to accommodate 1,000 people, you can concretize with 1,000 different houses, which are wooden. That's completely okay. But you can imagine that the surface area of those 1,000 houses is much more. So concretization is much more. Sprawling is much more in this particular 1,000 wooden houses particular area. But if you make a skyscraper, 100 this is skyscraper, and you make so the surface area which is concretized and completely devoid of ecosystems will be much less for the skyscraper. So skyscraper ideally should be a much better option as far as nature is concerned, because it enables more number of people to stay with less amount of nature destruction. So if 1,000 houses you are building, all of them with base of concrete, that much area ecosystems are completely destroyed. So it's a so sprawled cities is an absolutely bad idea as far as nature is concerned. But what about climate science? Climate science, sprawled cities has no this thing, because they don't actively release CO2. So there's no concern for them. So they will say, okay, sprawled cities, as long as there are intermittent green covers, that's okay. That's not a big problem. So agriculture, it's bad only because it causes CO2 emission, but they don't have any way of judging about virtual emissions. So agriculture also has virtual emissions. So it's like basically an area where agriculture is there, the amount of carbon sink which will come is limited because of the tilling and all. So sowing, and then again cutting, and then harvesting, and then again tilling, and then again, and the soil becomes, the ecosystems in the soil get destroyed. So ecosystem agriculture is also limiting the number of ecosystems that can develop, and it's also one of the major causes of insect apocalypse as well as extinction crisis, because the more is the population, the more agricultural land we need. So the more number of people are eating meat, the more is the agricultural land needed, the more water is needed. So all this water and this land, which is a resource, becomes unavailable to nature to make the balancing act. So nature is basically doing a balancing act by increasing the CO2 sink. So this sink is lost in agriculture and in concretization, as also in deforestation. But this loss of sink is what is called as virtual emissions by me in my book. I have described it in more detail. If you want, you can check it. So this virtual emissions or loss of carbon sink is completely neglected, or it's there. Nobody gives a damn about it. And the only thing which they are talking about is CO2 emissions, CO2 release, or other greenhouse gas releases. So chopping off old grown forests for more wooden houses and wooden skyscrapers is good for them. They are saying that chopping active trees is better, and put more trees instead of that, so that you can use the wood, which is a absolutely nonsense solution. But so they are not able to reach the right solutions. They are reaching absolute nonsense solutions. So what are they missing? Basically, what they are missing is that they want to focus only on greenhouse gases, and they are completely neglecting what I call virtual emissions. They're completely neglecting what is nature, what is ecosystems, what is the importance of ecosystems and nature. I'm going to talk about what are virtual emissions, and there are some other very interesting topics, like there is one hall room analogy, and there is one tank analogy, and I'm going to explain how exactly virtual emissions are there, and how there is a balance between how the carbon cycle is, and how there is a balance between carbon emissions and carbon sinks. So carbon sinks should be at any given micro or nanosecond, you can say, even a small amount of time on the whole Earth, the number of CO2 molecules being released and being sunk should be equal. Only then the CO2 concentration can remain equal. If the CO2 concentration was remaining constant for the last 80 lakh years, which means that the CO2 emissions and the CO2 sink was equal. So there was a balance between the two. But now what is happening is emissions are increasing and the sink is reducing, and nobody is talking about the reduced sink. So the loss of this CO2 sink is what I call virtual emissions, because they are actually not emissions, but they are the CO2 molecules which are remaining to be sunk. Means they're floating and they could have been sucked outside because of the living ecosystem, but the ecosystem was not allowed to develop because of the long-term strategy of humans. So it is anthropocentrism of humans. So humans want to think about only humans, and they don't want to think about the ecosystem. And so that is how the climate science is basically fooling us, I think. And I'm not going to say that we are not supposed to do decarbonization. Decarbonization is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that decarbonization is needed, but completely only decarbonization as the sole solution, and nature is completely crap. It's not important, and biodiversity is unimportant. All these things which the climate change preaches, climate science preaches, is wrong, is absolutely wrong. So nature and ecosystems are absolutely important, and you should not neglect them. And that's what is the message which I want to give here. And probably in the next subsequent videos, I will give a much more detailed explanation about virtual emissions. So thank you for watching this video, and I think if you like the content, you can share and subscribe. Thank you.